The 537th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys once again on a Wednesday night. We told you that if there was any information about Carolina getting involved with a transfer, we would be here to podcast about it. And we were not lying. Carolina, 2 more guys today that they have contacted, expressed interest in, however you want to describe it. We're here to talk about both of those guys during tonight's show. One I think that everyone should be really excited about, and one that I think really jumps up the list in terms of a priority for Carolina. And then the other guy, a guy that could maybe be more intriguing than what you're probably thinking about when you first learned about him on the surface. Before we talk about those 2 transfers, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We're going to Oprah Winfrey for today's pod thought, and that thought is, quote, do the one thing you think you cannot do, fail at it. Try again, do better the second time. The only people who never tumble are those who never mount the high wire. There's no denying that Carolina has failed. They failed 2 of the last 3 seasons. One where they missed the NCAA tournament altogether, and then this past year where they start preseason top 10, they make the first 4, they win their way into the first round, and then they go home. And that's unacceptable here. And that's why, Hubert Davis enters next season, I think, squarely on the hot seat. It's why Carolina went out and invested in a GM and is putting together a front office. And it's why, quite frankly, there's a toxic nature that exists around the program right now within the fan base. I'm not going to talk about the comments that, Justin there, that the Elliot Cadeau's brother made, but, he's on a Twitch stream talking about what led to his brother transferring, which now has prompted Theo Pinson to do a podcast in response to those comments. You have Justin Jackson, who's basically having to come to the defense of his criticism, something he is quite literally paid to do now as someone that is a working part of the media. And so it just brings to, a pulp where all the failure has forced Carolina to try again and try to do a much better job at what they're tasked at doing. Because while I think it's fair to be excited about who Carolina is targeting in the portal, it's also okay to say that this is not fun, and just the conversation that exists around the program right now is not where we thought it was going to be back in the preseason, and not where you want it to be, because everyone's got an opinion. Everyone's got an agenda they want to get across, and hopefully we're not doing this time next year, because hopefully the work that this staff does in the transfer portal allows the team to be a lot more successful on the court in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, it'd be nice to not have to deal with this again. At least to this extent, right? I think what you're really hoping is that, at some point Carolina is able to get back to a point where they are consistently in the tournament, where you will be talking about more so the timeline of when all of this stuff is happening, about the frustrations with that, about Carolina having to recruit while they are in the middle of a tournament run. Those are the types of things that I think you want to get back to in Chapel Hill, because right now you're in the midst of the most pressure-packed season that a coach is ever going to have in Chapel Hill. You're under the most scrutiny that you're ever going to have. I mean, it's like you said, pretty much every move is being scrutinized. We posted an article on the website about Malik Reneau last night, a guy that we talked about at length last night. If you didn't see that, go back, check out the last edition of the podcast. Multiple people saying, why are we even trying? Doesn't make sense because Carolina is not going to get this guy. This is as negative as the fan base has ever been. On top of the people that are criticizing them for not going after certain people, not going after a center, which right now, I mean, there really isn't a great one that exists in the portal. There's guys that I think are good. There's guys that I think have upside and can potentially become really good players. But I don't think that Carolina's got that can't-miss big man out there that they haven't contacted yet. Now, if they don't end up contacting Magoon Guath, and that's the biggest name that enters the portal, or one of the bigger names that enters the portal, maybe then we can have that conversation. But yeah, it's pretty bad right now, man. It's about as toxic as it gets. And I think a lot of people, are pretty angry about the fact that Carolina didn't get the reset that I think a lot were hoping that they would get. I think as we've gotten away from the season, as the season has now ended, you see that there is a majority of the fan base that really did want Hubert Davis fired and wanted to start fresh. Now, they would have been sorely mistaken if they would have thought that that was a non-family hire that would have been coming in. And it's why I think, I think Carolina made the right decision to run this back, bring in Jim Tanner. And now, we're undergoing these changes. It's a weird time because we're, today, I think we all thought we were going to get at least something else. We were going to get somebody within the program that was either going to say, I'm officially going to the NBA, I'm entering the transfer portal, I'm coming back. We didn't get any of that today. So I think that's kind of the part that, sucks about this, is we're expecting news to happen quickly. And we thought after yesterday it would start to pick up. But I think we're just kind of riding the wave right now. And the hope is that, we just get through this as quickly as possible. I love being on here. I love doing these podcasts each and every night. I'm hoping that part of it actually continues moving forward, because we have some news about some exciting targets that Carolina is searching out. But I want to get past all the negativity and just start focusing on next season, because I know right now this is certainly not fun for me as a fan of the team that's on the other side of what most people are, which is that I believe that Hubert Davis is still the right guy for the job and is going to get Carolina back to where they need to be.
Some positivity that doesn't involve right now. This is a pretty good date, though, March 26th, when you look at the history of Carolina basketball. On this day, back in 2000, 25 years ago, Julius Peppers and Joseph Forte led an 8-seeded Carolina team past Tulsa on their way to a second Final Four in 3 seasons under Bill Guthridge. And also today is May Day. For those of you that are younger Carolina fans, it was on this day, believe it or not, now 8 years ago, that Luke May hit a jump shot with 0.3 seconds left to beat Kentucky in the regional final, send Carolina back to the Final Four on their way to the 2017 National Championship. And that was the shot that put Luke May on the map and really started his ascension into becoming, a much better Tar Heel than anyone would have thought when he arrived. I'm talking about a guy that would become, an all ACC player during his time in Chapel Hill. So, we're not playing basketball right now, and that's unfortunate. But this has been a pretty good date in the history of the program. And so hopefully this time next year, we're sitting here recording, previewing a matchup in the Sweet 16 or maybe, the Elite Eight, depending on how the calendar falls. And hopefully this program is, as you mentioned, where we expect it to be, because you're right. As someone that literally hangs on everything this program does, this is not like the podcast is fun. The content is fun. We've had a lot of success here early on in the offseason. We're doing some really good numbers, and that's great. But I wish it was with more positivity. I wish it was with more upbeatness and just more faith, man. Like I've never seen a fan base that's just so dejected and that's just so down on its head coach. And you're talking about a head coach that has coached in a national championship game. You're talking about a head coach that's won a regular season conference title and has been a 1 seed in the tournament. Like, I think we live in this bubble where it's always been what this year was or what 2 years ago was. That hasn't been the case. There's been a lot of good that Carolina has experienced under Hubert Davis. The goal, the task is to put himself in a position to ensure that Carolina has that success long-term starting next season. So with that, let's go ahead and get to the news. We got 2 transfers to talk about tonight. The first one, I think, is the one that is easily the one to get the most excited about. That's Donovan Dent. That's the point guard transfer from New Mexico, who's coming off a spectacular junior season where he averaged 20.4 points per game, 6.4 assists, 2.3 rebounds, while shooting 49% from the field, 41% from three, on his way to earning Mountain West Player of the Year honors and leading the Lobos to the second round of the NCAA tournament, where they pushed Michigan State. And that was a game deep into the second half before Sparty was able to flex its muscle on its way to another Sweet 16 under Tom Izzo. This is a guy that the media, from the moment that he entered the portal, the fans were screaming for, Carolina to get involved with. Analysts that cover the program were basically clamoring, hey, Carolina's got to get involved with this guy. And lo and behold, that involvement became official today, as reported by Tar Heel Illustrated. He's 20.4 points per game. We're 8th highest in the country. So we're talking about a top 10 scorer nationally. But it's not just 1 year of production. His sophomore season at New Mexico, he averaged 14.1 points per game and 5.4 assists. And New Mexico was a team that made the tournament a year ago and was a trendy pick to win a lot of games and play deep into March. He's in the portal. Main reason why his head coach left New Mexico, Richard Portino, has now been named the new head coach at Xavier. So obviously Xavier, I think, would be in the mix for him. He did not rule out a potential return to the Lobos. Virtually every major power conference program with a pulse is going to be in on this kid. And, we've talked about last night and we've stressed Carolina has been putting more of a premium on experienced players from the power conference level, and rightfully so. But as someone that watches college basketball nationally, you look at Donovan Dent, you look at the production, you look at the body. He's got a 6'2" frame, 185 pounds. Everything screams that his talent would translate to the power conference level. And so this was a guy that Carolina had to get involved with. And you can make the argument right up there with Isaac McNeely. He might right now be the most coveted transfer target for this program right now in the portal.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to not be enticed by what he's able to do. I mean, when you're the Mountain West Player of the Year, and I know we are guys that knock on the Mountain West Conference. We say that they are way overvalued and everything like that. And that certainly, I think, is still true. But what I do think is that it is the top mid-major conference at this point. I think it's sort of set itself above all those other ones. You've seen, now 3-4 years consecutively, they're putting 3 or 4 teams, if not more than that, in the NCAA tournament consistently. So This is certainly a guy that's playing a pretty high level of basketball. And you look at him, I mean, the way that he's able to score the ball is exactly what Carolina's looking for from their lead guard next season. It's what they need. You're talking about a guy that shot 49% from the field as a point guard this year. That is incredibly efficient. And here's the thing that's crazy. That was the lowest field goal percentage of his entire career for a season. Easily the most volume that he's shot, but still, that's a really, really good number. A guy that has progressively started taking more threes throughout his career. Not necessarily the strength of his game, but certainly is part of it. He is a really good catch and shoot player. He ranks in the 100th percentile in terms of effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot looks. So that's an area of his game that, even though he doesn't utilize it a ton, it is an area where he excels at a pretty high rate. So really like that. Love the ability to share the basketball. 6.4 assists, I think, is more than enough. That would certainly do in this conference, especially if you're going to be able to score the way that he is able to score. And also, a guy that shoots the ball well at the foul line, at least this year. The previous 2 years shot around 68%. This year jumps all the way up to 78%. So really like to see that from him. I think this is a guy that Carolina needs to be aggressive with, because everything is there. Even, you look at the defensive efficiency numbers for him. I mean, one of the better defenders that you're going to find out there in the transfer portal as well, especially for a point guard. So just all around the most complete player that is in the portal right now. I think this is one that Carolina has to be prepared for a battle with. Apparently, one of the teams that's very aggressive going after him is Duke. That should show you that he is a very highly touted prospect, considering that Duke, not big at going after big-time transfers. You saw this year they were just trying to strategically add certain guys. I mean, this guy would be maybe their lead guard next season. So Carolina's got its work cut out for him, but I believe that them jumping on him early, being out of the tournament and being able to focus on him a little bit more than some of these other teams may also help Carolina's chances in this one. But this certainly has to be one that's very high, if not atop the list for Carolina when it comes to their priorities this offseason.
Yeah, this is a guy that you move on from Elliot Cadeau, you bring him in, and that decision I think is 100% justified, because you're looking for a guy that can score the ball, yes, but do so efficiently. Those numbers are crazy. Like you put that type of efficiency in Carolina's backcourt this year. This is a different season. Like, Carolina's not in the first four. Carolina's probably still playing right now, if we're being 100% honest. But they didn't have that guy, in their lineup a year ago, and so. I think this is a guy that, as I mentioned, you cited Duke. Every major power conference program with a pulse is going to try to get this guy into their program, because even though he's coming from the mid-major level, he's a power conference player that was playing at a mid-major conference. But as you mentioned, the best mid-major conference that there is in college basketball, and so. I expect Carolina to be very aggressive. This is one where if you want to pony up the NIL money for him, it makes a whole lot of sense, because he's going to be that coveted, and it's going to take, a pretty big financial commitment to ensure that he, ends up in Chapel Hill as opposed to, somewhere else. So, I mentioned it when I was setting the scene for this guy. When McNeely entered the portal, we all sat here and said that makes a lot of sense. Carolina been in contact with either him or his agent, you would presume, because he entered with the no contact clause when he entered the portal on Monday morning. When you look at Dent, is this a situation where Carolina is prioritizing him over Isaac McNeely, or the fact that McNeely is a off-ball guard? There's a situation where Carolina goes all in on bringing both of these guys potentially into their roster? Is this a situation where you think Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner are choosing between one or the other, or with the fact that Dent is a very willing passer and is not just a ball dominant guard that can score it? He's a guard that can also get his teammates involved. This opens up an avenue for Carolina to bring in two of the best backcourt guys in the portal right now.
Yeah, this is very clearly that Carolina would want to team these two guys up. I think you're talking about Dent, a guy that is known for driving the basket, wants to get to the rim, score it inside. That's his strength. That's, what he is best at, and he's very efficient at being able to do it. That's the thing, is you could say, well, Elliot Cadeau is a guy that wants to get to the rim and score it. Yeah, but there's a difference. This is a guy that can hit the shot from the outside, but when he gets to the rim, he is incredibly efficient and is going to find a way to put it in the basket. I think you could play both of these guys together, because McNeely is a guy that his game is based on playing outside almost exclusively. He can create on his own. The good news is that, as we've talked about, he's not just a catch and shoot type of guy. He does have the ability to create a shot off of his dribble, but that's where he shines, is from the outside. And, same thing, he's a guy that, has had moments where he's been a pretty efficient defender. This year wasn't necessarily the case, but certainly coming from that Virginia system, you would imagine that there is something in there. There is some sort of defensive fire that he does have. So I think teaming both of those guys together, ideally that would be the backcourt you would want to put together, because that's one that can win you a lot of games in the ACC. Then the question becomes, what do you do with a guy like Seth Trimble if you are wanting him to come back? I think you just have to find a spot for him. But when you've got guys that are this efficient and Seth Trimble is simply not, this might be the plan for Carolina, if both guys, of course, are willing to come to Chapel Hill.
Yeah, no, I think these guys complement each other's game to where if you want to go all in on both and bring them into your program, it makes a lot of sense. It's not like with Love and with RJ where they had to learn how to play with one another. Like, I think the way that Dent plays would complement McNeely. The way that McNeely plays would complement Dent. And you're getting the best out of both players. And look, as much as I want Seth Trimble back, I value, his leadership. I value having a guy that's been around. You can't be afraid to recruit over him. Like, if you have a chance to bring in better players that fit what you want to do and have a better and have produced more, then you can't be afraid to do that, which I do think that has been something that Carolina has struggled with in the portal era, is it hasn't felt like they've wanted to recruit over guys. Outside of Jalen Washington, but that was their way of telling us, hey, we know he's not ready. We need to go find a different big man, because there were other guys in the portal the past couple of off seasons that Carolina theoretically should have been involved with, but because they had this player or that player coming back, they weren't as aggressive in the portal. That mindset has to change. You've got to be willing to recruit over guys that are still on your roster right now that might later enter the portal if you do bring in someone that's a better player. But you've got to be willing to do that. That's the part of this where this is now a transactional business every single year until these guys start signing 2-3 year contracts. You've got to put together the best team for every season. And so if Hubert Davis feels like a backcourt consisting of Donovan Dent and Isaac McNeely is a better backcourt than one that features one or the other alongside Seth Trimble, then he needs to be aggressive in pursuing that, because his job is to put together the best possible roster to ensure that Carolina wins at the level that the fan base expects to win at, and especially for a coach that's entering a make or break season. So there's our look at Donovan Dent. As I mentioned, this is going to be a transfer portal recruitment that we're going to monitor very closely, and this is going to be one where, like, this is a guy that if Carolina gets involved with, they get an official visit, whatever, and he commits to Carolina. I think that changes some of the negativity that does exist around the program right now, that does exist around Hubert Davis right now. I think the same thing would be said for Isaac McNeely, but I really think so with Dent. That would be a nice, shot in the arm for Hubert Davis, who's definitely going to need to, re-invoke some confidence in him from his fan base. We'll now turn our attention to the second transfer that Carolina got involved with earlier today. With that, I'm going to turn the show over to Anthony. He wrote the article on the website earlier today. I was away dealing with a family matter, so we're going to let Anthony set the scene for the second transfer that Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, and Carolina got involved with earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, and that would be West Virginia transfer wing player Jonathan Powell. He is a guy that the Portal Report reported earlier today, talking to 15 teams, or at least 15 teams that he has received interest from, and Carolina is one of them. In his lone season at the college level, Powell averaged 8.3 points per game, 3.1 rebounds per game, while shooting 38% from the field and 35% from three-point range. All those numbers pretty solid, especially for a guy that sort of rotated back and forth, I think, early in the season because he was a true freshman. Did not start, but did play in all those games. He ends up starting at the end of the season 23 of the 32 games for the West Virginia Mountaineers. Thing about him is that he pretty much does two things. He is either a guy that gets out in transition and can score, very athletic. That's one thing that really stands out about him. Very explosive guy that can get up, throw down some dunks in transition, but also 72.5% of his shots this season came from behind the arc. So this is a dude that is a catch and shoot three-point guy, and that is the exact type of player that, Carolina fans really want. But remember, we also wanted that with Cade Tyson. So a very interesting player, one that I think if they're bringing him in, would be a solid replacement for Drake Powell, but I think would be somewhat limited. Pretty solid defensive numbers. So competes on that end of the floor. His defensive rating was about average, kind of where you would want it to be. Not an excellent defender, but certainly a guy that can get the job done for you from that perspective. I think this is a guy that if Carolina was to bring him in, I think we're bringing him in and we're also bringing someone else in. Or you're saying, okay, we're playing Caleb Wilson at the 3, a decent amount. This is going to be the guy that comes off the bench and can help us in that role as well. I think I could see him being a starter if Carolina was to land him, but I could also see why they would want to bring him off the bench. But really, just an explosive guy from the outside, which could be something that could really be valuable for Carolina, especially with some of the issues that they had at certain times this year when shooting the ball from the outside.
Yeah, I look at this mainly as you're just wanting to add pure shooting to your roster, something that you lacked this past season. You mentioned him as a replacement for Drake Powell if he goes pro. Very well, could be the case. I think you're looking at him as a guy that assuming Cade Tyson enters the portal, that's the first thing that that's the guy he's immediately replacing. That the guy that you brought in last year to bring shooting to the roster, that guy never translated onto the court in Chapel Hill. You go bring in Jonathan Powell, a guy that did so on a solid team at the Power Conference level, and you're not going to be upset about adding 35% shooting from behind the three-point line to your roster, and a guy that played a lot of minutes per game in a Big 12. So not as experienced as some of the other guys Carolina has targeted, who all played multiple years at the college level, but he does have experience at the Power Conference level, which I think is something that Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, they value. And so I think this is one where if he turns out to be what Cade Tyson is, or what Cade Tyson was, which was the headlining piece of your transfer portal class, then we've got problems. like, then we've got issues. We're not going to feel any better about where Carolina is entering next season. But if he's a secondary piece to a class that features a Dent, a Malik Renault, and then a Jonathan Powell or an Isaac McNeely, a starting 5-man, and then a Jonathan Powell. Okay, then that's going to go over a lot better, I think, with the fan base. That's going to play a lot better optically than him being your headliner. So, I think this is one where Carolina is doing. It makes a lot of sense why Carolina is getting invested in him. You want to add perimeter shooting. You need it on your roster. It's a big reason why this team struggled the way that it did at times this past season against power conference competition, because they just could not shoot the ball well from the outside. So it's not a surprise that Hubert Davis is looking to add a guy to just put on the floor that can shoot the ball well from behind the 3-point line. So makes a lot of sense. And I think the one thing you got to give this staff credit for is every transfer portal target so far makes sense. Like, you see why Carolina is getting involved. There's been times where they've been interested in guys and it feels like they just want to have their name out there. Carolina feels a lot more selective. That's what happens when you have a GM. But they also, every guy that they have targeted so far, you could see really adding to the roster and being a big part of whatever success this team enjoys next season. So, and that's another benefit of being home right now, is that you can really do a deep dive on these guys, better identify who can help you, who can help you next season. And this is a guy that, a specific skill set, but one that I think would bring a lot of value to the Tar Heels if he were to end up in Chapel Hill next season.
Now, would you worry about the fact that this is another guy that really is just a catch-and-shoot type player? Because that's what Cade Tyson was. Couldn't really create on his own, although we saw, back at Belmont, I mean, there was that ability, and that kind of disappeared a little bit from his game, where this year he basically just became that catch-and-shoot type of guy. Would it concern you that you are you're getting someone that is so specifically set in one skill on that end of the floor? Because if the shot doesn't fall, there's not really much else that he brings to the table.
No, because I think that you just understand, like, kind of with Cade Tyson, if he's shooting the ball, he's going to get minutes. If he's not putting the ball in the basket from the outside, maybe he still plays because he, competes defensively, gets to the boards or whatever. But, his job is to put the ball in the basket. If he's not doing that, then his minutes are going to be limited. You just can't put him in a position to expect as much from him as you expected from Cade Tyson this past offseason. Like, that was the thing. If Cade Tyson wasn't the prize of the transfer portal class that Carolina brought in a year ago, and if the expectations weren't what they were, we'd still be disappointed in the lack of production you got from him, but it'd been more understandable. That wasn't the case. Like, we were expecting this guy to show up, be a double-digit point per game scorer, shoot over 40% from three, and probably be your starting 4-man by the time you started playing meaningful games and conference play. That never happened. That never once was even on the table for Cade Tyson. Maybe Jonathan Powell could be that guy, but I feel like this would be a guy that you're bringing off the bench to put perimeter scoring on the floor, and get some better floor spacing on the floor. So I'm not against having a catch and shoot guy on your roster. Virtually every team has one. So as long as he's being put in a situation to where expectations aren't too high, I'm not against Carolina bringing in a guy that you're going to put on the floor that's going to stand in the corner and shoot the 3 ball at 36% for the entire year.
Yeah, I mean, he's more of a, top of the perimeter type shooter. That's really the area where he's been most successful, or sort of on the elbows. He does have that corner shooting ability as well, but really both that right and left elbow is really the areas that he shines, watching his highlight tape. I mean, I think the other thing to remember about him, he's a freshman. So he's also a guy that is going to be able to develop his game, whether it's, especially with Hubert Davis, you would imagine Hubert's going to want him to do a little bit more than just be a catch and shoot type of player. So I could see Carolina, bringing him in, trying to help him in that area. But yeah, I mean, the strength of this guy is going to be catching and shooting the basketball. And you can't let Cade Tyson scare you. Because if Cade Tyson had hit, then that would be the recipe that you were looking for each and every year, would be to get a guy that can knock down shots at as great of a rate as he did. I mean, look at Kobe Brea and how successful he's been at Kentucky. He's had to adapt his game, and I think he's been pretty good. The other thing that you like about Powell, he's got some size. Now, I think, in order for him to really be super effective, you're going to need him to rebound a little bit more. But at 6'6", I mean, the size is there. And that's the reason why I said, maybe he fits as part of the help to replace a guy like Drake Powell. Because Cade was a little bit taller. Cade was what, 6'8", I believe? 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in that range. He's a little bit shorter, but I do think that he can do some similar things to what we've seen from Powell in terms of rebounding, in terms of some of what we've seen defensively. Won't be as good of a defender, don't get me wrong, not even close to as good of a defender as Drake Powell is, but still a solid guy on the wing that can help take guys away out there because of his length. So I think that could be an interesting name to keep an eye on. In terms of where I would rank him with the guys that we've talked about so far, to me, that's the guy that Carolina fans should probably be talking about the least. In terms of wanting, but I think it is certainly a name to keep an eye on. And you're right. I think this is one of those guys where if this is your third guy in the transfer class, you're good with it. Even if this is your Cormac Ryan, I think maybe you can live with it because he was a freshman last year and he showed some upside. He started a lot of games for them. He could develop into a really good player. If this is your headliner, this feels a lot like last year, and that's where you start to get concerned about where Carolina's class is officially at and where the roster is officially at. Now, in terms of other things to talk, do we want to talk about this, which I don't know how this is a storyline. People are now getting into this conversation that Hubert Davis had on the Carolina Insider Pod with Jones, or maybe it was on his radio show. It's one of the two, where he said that we need to get bigger. And people are now trying to figure out what exactly does it mean that he says that he's getting into the analytics to help figure out what it means that Carolina needs to get bigger. I think it's pretty simple. It's what we've talked about the last few nights. There are analytics that are going to tell you that teams like Florida, Michigan State, who are playing two bigs, are starting to succeed. I think that's really all that he's saying, but I think people are basically trying to make it out like this shows that Hubert Davis doesn't know how to coach because he should have known this already.
Yeah, I'll address it here briefly because that was going to be a podcast for me later in the week, was going through and recapping his radio show because that's basically his end of season media availability. Look, I think basically what he's saying, and he said this when he talks to the media, Carolina uses analytics. They're not reliant on analytics. And you look at these SEC programs, yeah, you've got great coaches, Oates, Pearl, Golden, these guys that are still coaching. But a lot of what they do is driven by a formula. It's driven by a shot that's predetermined. Like, I mean, with Alabama, it's clear cut. They take basically two shots. They shoot layups, they shoot threes, and they go to the foul line. There's not a whole lot of in between. Carolina hasn't gotten that far advanced quite yet. And I'm not saying that I'm against it, but the analytics don't value mid-range jump shots. But if you got a player that shoots a mid-range jump shot, like RJ Davis, I'm not going to, I don't want to deter him from being able to shoot that shot if it's as effective as it is. I think he's doing what every coach needs to do at the end of every year. He's doing some self-scouting. And he's being open to what does he need to do himself to become a better coach. And, how can Carolina be, everyone has this information at its disposal, but it's all about how you use it and how you apply it. And how much do you want to integrate that into your program? It's kind of what you see in baseball, where, and it's a very appropriate that we talk about this because opening day is tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. But you've got teams like the Rays, the Guardians, that is their whole infrastructure is analytics. And it's how they have to compete. Then you've got teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers who have analytics at their disposal, but they've also got payrolls north of $300 million. And so they don't have to use these, complicated formulas to put out a winning product because they can go put together a lineup like the Dodgers, who all of their wars are ridiculous to where they've got a lineup that could theoretically, compete for the most wins in baseball regular season history. So I think that's what he's saying is that, hey, we've got this information here. We've got it at our disposal. How can I use it more effectively? And yeah, what does the math say for Florida, for Michigan, for an Auburn that plays two bigs at the same time for an extended period of time? Because we were moving away from that idea and that philosophy, but you've got a quarter of the team still playing in the Sweet 16 that defy that. So I think the reaction to those comments that he made on his radio show kind of bring us back to what we said at the beginning of this podcast. Everything he says, everything he does is going to be nitpicked. It's going to be dissected, and it's going to be complained about. There's nothing he can say that's not going to anger somebody. That's not going to make someone fire off a tweet. So my plan is to listen to that episode of his radio show tomorrow and do a podcast either late tomorrow night or first thing on Friday morning. But just from reading the quotes from Adam Lucas, did not really see anything there that was all that damning the way the fan base has responded since that quote became public a little over 3 hours ago.
Yeah, I think it just shows you that our fan base is incredibly overreactive at this point, that they're looking for things to be angry about because that really doesn't make sense to get angry about that. Those are comments that I think somebody just a few minutes ago on social media posting saying, how is this something that we didn't know already? How is this not something that was part of the plan before the portal opening? So you really think that tonight was the first time that they sat down and thought about this, or whenever that edition of his radio show came out earlier in the week? You think that was the first time that they really thought about it was after the portal opened? Oh, maybe we should take a look at the analytics. No, that's been that's probably been looked at. That was probably looked at in the middle of the season. So again, people are trying to make it seem like Hubert Davis is a simpleton, a moron, when really they should be looking in the mirror at themselves. This is, guys, he knows what he's doing. I'm assuming that when he went back and did the same thing a couple of off seasons ago, he found out that the analytics told him what was lacking for Carolina was eventually what he got in Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan. It's going to be fine. The analytics thing is we're looking to see if we can basically play an old school style. And be successful. That's what it means to me. Because if they're wanting to retain Vin Allen Lubin, you're not playing Vin Allen Lubin at the 5. Everybody's clamoring, we want to get bigger. We want to get bigger. Okay, well, he's telling you that he wants to get bigger, and now you're complaining about that? I mean, seriously, are you this dense? Are you stupid? It doesn't make sense to me how you can beg for that. And then when he tells you, yeah, we literally want to get bigger. Oh, well, we should have known that already. We should have gotten bigger last offseason. Well, they tried to get bigger last offseason. They didn't have the NIL collective to get it done. So, I mean, this is the reality of the situation that you're stuck in. Hubert Davis, your coach, man. He is the guy. Him and Jim Tanner are working together to build this roster, and you just have to be okay with it. And if not, then guess what? You can jump off the bandwagon. Don't jump back on when things are successful, though. That's all I'm going to say. So hopefully these people, I mean, seriously, get on some anxiety medications, get on something, get a therapist. You need something because, oh my gosh, it is going to be a long, long season if this is how you are going to handle every little thing like this.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the podcast. Before we let you go, guys, we encourage you to visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Both transfers that we talked about on tonight's edition have articles up on the site. I wrote up the article about Donovan Dent. Anthony took care of Jonathan Powell. You can go and read about both of those guys if you want to. As well, we're keeping you covered wall to wall. Any news that comes out of the transfer portal, we've got you covered on the Carolina basketball front. Same thing with Carolina football. Anything from recruiting to transfer portal to spring practice updates, you name it, we've got you covered there as well. So we really just encourage you to visit the site every single morning, afternoon, and evening, because we can guarantee you there's going to be two to three articles posted every single day about either program. So get to the website. That way you're staying up to date with the latest around Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball off season. So with that, guys, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.